We're all looking to try and find the best metrics and data points to time our profit taking for this coming bull market. But what metrics best predicted the peaks in previous cycles? And what are they currently predicting for this one? Today, we're going to be looking at some hindsight predictions for BTC and see if we can use that data for our current cycle to try and predict the next Bitcoin peak. So the two metrics we're going to be looking at specifically for this video are the MVRV Z-score, which has been one of the most accurate metrics of on-chain data at calling market cycle peaks, as well as bottoms. But for this specifically, we're going to be looking at market cycle peaks for Bitcoin, as well as the Pi cycle top indicator, which is a market cycle chart just using two technical moving averages that has called not only the timing, but also to some degree the price of the market cycle tops for Bitcoin as well. So the way we're actually going to be going about doing these predictions is using these CSV data download buttons we have on Look Into Bitcoin with a site subscription that allow you to actually download the raw data from these charts, manipulate them, forecast them, and actually see how that plays out, as well as maybe collating them, which we'll do in a future video. And again, to do this, what I've done is kind of assume we're 2 months away from the Bitcoin halving. I know we're slightly less than this, but we could be slightly more. It's not a fixed date, so we're just going to say 2 months away from the halving. So I've looked at the same point in previous cycles, both the 2016 cycle for the Pi cycle top indicator, as well as 2 months before the halving in 2020 for the MVRV Z-score. And I've used that date, assuming we didn't have future information, using information that was already available to us at those points to see if we'd have looked at these metrics just individually, predicted them going forward at their current rate of change, well, current at that time, to see how accurate they were. And then we'll see if using the same methodology for our current data set gives us some interesting results. So here we can just see the raw data of the MVRV Z-score, the price, market cap, realized price, and Z-score. And what I've done, if we just scroll down, we'll see here, as I've used this data from 2020, we'll just go to 2 months before the halving event in 2020. And what I've done is actually just use the 3 months of data prior to that halving date. So the halving date in 2020 was the 11th of May. So here I've just used the 3 months of data prior to that to actually gain the average rate of change of this metric. If I just quickly go back to the chart here and explain, basically we're using the 3 months of data before the halving, which was about here, looking at the rate of change of that to see if that was very accurate at predicting the cycle peak. Now, this wouldn't have predicted the cycle peak price, but it would have predicted when the cycle peak actually occurred. So like I said, we're just using the rate of change of the 3 months prior to the halving, 2 months before the halving event, to actually see how that looked. And if I just scroll up here, I might have scrolled a little bit past it, we can see that if this rate of change was constant, using data from a year and a half before the cycle peak, this actually predicted the MVRV Z-score to surpass the value of 7, which has historically been the sell area on the MVRV Z-score, on the 19th of February 2021. If we actually go back to the MVRV Z chart here, and if I just zoom out a little bit so you can see a little clearer, we can actually see that this was incredibly accurate. The MVRV Z-score actually surpassed the value of 7 on this metric, if I just remove that, on the 21st of February 2021. So again, just using the rate of change we had a year and a half before the cycle peak, this actually predicted just 2 days off, years in advance, using old data. Now, was this a little bit of a coincidence? Potentially. But really, we do have to take into account that if we actually take a very similar point in all of the cycles, it actually predicts a very similar point to the time when we actually hit the cycle peak. It doesn't, like I said, predict the price, and this is all potentially just coincidence. We can't take this as truth. Just because it's happened previously doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen again. But if we then go on to the Pi cycle top chart here, again, I've done a very similar thing. So I've looked at the 3 months of data. I've done a very similar thing. So I've used 3 months of data to the point of 2 months before the halving event. And this is for 2016. So if we scroll down here, the Bitcoin halving took place in, if I just keep scrolling down here, I've forecasted the rate of change we had on the Pi cycle top at that point. If we just scroll down here, we can actually see the Pi cycle top indicates the cycle peak when these cross over. And now this indicated that the cycle peak would have crossed on the 18th of October 2017, which was actually around 2 months before the actual cycle peak. So this wasn't exactly accurate like the MVRVZ score was in 2020. However, again, we need to take into account that this is using data from a year and a half before the cycle peak. So to actually say that we're modeling data using just a 3-month average from a year and a half before the cycle peak, before the halving date, and it's still only a few weeks off calling the cycle peak, that's quite accurate. So what we're going to do is actually use this data, use this methodology, and kind of forward project our current data using the previous 3 months that we currently have to today, 2 months before the halving, to see what they're both currently predicting. So if I scroll down first and foremost for this pi cycle top chart here, like I said, I've just done the exact same calculations using our current set of data. We can't see the current price or 111-day moving average because they haven't happened yet, but they're predicting these two lines to cross now on the 10th of June 2025 at a price of around $140,000, which is pretty interesting. But if we then go to the MVRVZ score and scroll down, again, exact same thing. Once this crosses a value of 7 using the current rate of change that we're seeing is the 3rd of June 2025. So only a week apart, these two metrics are actually pointing towards a Bitcoin cycle peak happening at a very similar time in about a year and a half from now, which is, again, very interesting to say that we're kind of seeing a little bit of repeating history here. And another thing we can do that is pretty interesting, at least I think anyway, using this pi cycle top data. Like we said, it also has some degree of accuracy calling the price of the cycle peak. We can see the diminishing percentage increases above these moving averages at the cycle peak time. So when we see this peak here, price was around $1,100 and the moving averages crossed about $280. So we'll just say about a 4x. And then here, price was again around $20,000 at the peak, and these moving averages were $7,000. So we'll say 2.5 to 3 times. But then in the most recent cycle here, these crossed at around $45,000, $46,000 as price was about $64,000. So we can definitely see that it's not as crazily above these moving averages at the point of crossing. So if we were just to assume a 10 or 20% price increase above these moving averages in line with the diminishing returns we're seeing, as we said, these lines are predicted to cross at $140,000. That gives a Bitcoin price around $150,000 to $160,000. And as we have some confluence with the MVRVZ score also predicting a market cycle top at that time, it's very interesting to see how this is going to play out. Like we said, data is changing all of the time, so these metrics, of course, are likely to change going forward. But considering they're both converging on that date, it's definitely one we need to watch. Also, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to ensure you're receiving all of our content as soon as it's released. And make sure to check out all the resources we've discussed today, as well as the many more that are all available on lookintobitcoin.com, your #1 source for Bitcoin information. So just to summarize, looking at the historical data of both the MVRVZ score and the pi cycle top indicators, and specifically their data trends at comparable moments in previous cycles. So for both of these, we looked at 2 months before those previous halving events and used 3 months of data before that point to actually calculate their trends. We can see how accurate these models were months and even years before a cycle peak with their predictions. And like we saw, the MVRVZ was 2 days off. I know the pi cycle top was 2 months off, but realistically, when we're looking months and even years in advance, this is still a very high degree of accuracy. And using the exact same methodology on our current data, both metrics are pointing towards a very similar approximate cycle peak time of summer 2025, with a potential price point of about $150,000 to $160,000. That's looking at the percentage difference between the price and the increase of the moving averages on the pi cycle top indicator. But like we said, data changes constantly. Do not rely just on this. If I did this video in a month's time, I'm sure all indicators and metrics would give some slightly different calculations once again. This is just something that we can use to maybe get a very rough idea of probabilities. And if we continue to do calculations like this, eventually they will all converge to potentially give us a pretty accurate data point of a cycle peak time and price. If you like this video, then please visit lookintobitcoin.com, where you can also consider becoming a site subscriber to gain access to professional resolution charts, advanced macro and portfolio data tools, in-depth crypto industry reports, live and personalized indicator alerts, private TradingView scripts, and more, all for a fraction of the standard industry price. And let me know what your thoughts are on potentially seeing a Bitcoin price topping out about $150,000 to $160,000 in the summer of 2025, just under a year and a half from now. Do you think that's a possibility? Do you think that's too bullish? Do you think that's maybe a little bit too bearish? As I said, let me know in the comments and on social media. I look forward to reading and replying to all of them. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.